Okay, I want you to picture this. You're in a massive auditorium. It's packed. The lights are searing hot, and you can just feel the energy from thousands of people. On stage, there's a guitarist. Maybe it's someone legendary, someone you've seen 100 times. And tonight, they are just completely lost in the music. They rip into this solo, and it's not just fast, it's complex. The timing is all over the place. Notes are bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. But here's the kicker.
They learned this entire piece, this incredibly intricate thing, not by reading a single note of sheet music. They just listened to a recording maybe 4 or 5 times, and then
they just did it.
That's it. That visceral moment, that immediate jump from sound to pure action. It feels effortless, it's raw, and it completely, totally bypasses the entire system we've built around music education.
It's pure creation. Or, okay, think about something maybe more relatable. Think about a bunch of kids in a garage band.
Yeah.
They're trying to nail a really tough rhythm or figure out a chord progression from their favorite song. What do? They loop a 30-second clip on YouTube over and over and over until their fingers just know where to go.
And they cannot tell you the difference between a whole note and a chord arrest. Not a chance.
Not a chance. Yet, they're achieving a level of musicianship. I'm talking about improvisation, creative arrangement, oral skill. This is frankly really advanced.
And it forces us to ask this
really profound question. How are these highly motivated people succeeding when they're not just ignoring the rules, they're acting like the rules don't even exist?
exactly, they're
Learning the secret language of music, but they've completely thrown out the written alphabet.
right.
And that mystery, that huge disconnect between formal training and how people actually achieve mastery in the real world, that is what's driving our deep dive today. We're really challenging decades of tradition here. We're going to look at a groundbreaking pedagogical revolution, a whole new way of teaching, pioneered by researchers at UCL, that's University College London. They basically decided to stop fighting the garage band and start bringing its DNA into the classroom.
And that's really only half the story, isn't it? Because we're also going to synthesize all the latest neuroscience to figure out what the brain is actually doing when we learn by ear.
Oh, yeah.
And this includes navigating a pretty surprising controversy around the theory
Of musical intelligence, which is an idea that almost everyone loves.
Our mission today is to cut through all that noise so you can understand this radical shift in education.
And more than that, I see the compelling evidence that shows actively making music in any form fundamentally rewires your brain for massive cognitive benefits.
This isn't just about music class.
No, not at all. It's about understanding human potential.
And it's also about separating the very real, very positive results of these new teaching methods from the, let's say, scientifically contested theories that people sometimes use to justify them.
Right. We want to make sure the knowledge you get today is solid. It's anchored in rigorous, modern science, not just feel-good ideas.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've painted this very romantic picture of the garage band genius. Spontaneous creation. But that whole idea stands in, almost direct opposition to the long, disciplined tradition of classical music education.
It really does.
To understand the revolution, we have to identify the villain in the story, even if
If it's, an unintentional one.
And the villain really is the traditional structure itself, the whole pedagogical system. It's been around forever, and it's built on these very specific, seemingly
Unshakable foundations.
like what? Let's listen.
Okay, so first, think about what we demand from a traditional student. There's the absolute necessity of regular and usually very solitary practice.
My lonely piano lessons in the basement come to mind.
Exactly. Then there's the strictly planned sequential progression. You learn this scale, then this exercise, then this slightly harder exercise. It's all laid out for you.
A to B to C. No skipping ahead.
None. And it's all built around constant teacher guidance, where the teacher's main job is to help you translate the notation, the dots on the page, into the correct sounds.
It's the ultimate step-by-step instruction manual for music. And it often requires years of discipline before a student ever gets to play something that sounds even remotely like the music they actually love and listen to.
The structure itself basically implies that without notation, without that whole hierarchy of scales and exercises, you simply
cannot succeed. It's the only path.
And this leads right to the big problem, right? The thing that fueled this whole revolution in the first place, the dropout crisis.
The dropout
crisis. Exactly. Researchers, especially in the UK, where they were tracking this stuff closely, they realized something huge. The students who fail out of formal lessons, ones who quit the school band or stop taking their graded exams, they're usually not unmusical.
No way. They're often the most passionate ones.
They're intensely motivated. They just fundamentally reject the method of being taught.
So they vote with their feet.
They do. They take all that time and energy and they pour it into an alternative system. The informal, the listening copy, the collaborative methods of popular music, they're still deeply musical. They've just found a different path, a non-credentialed path to achievement.
A path that actually brings them joy and connects them with their friends.
Right. They choose to learn the actual songs they know and like, and they do it in a way that gives them immediate results and, crucially, social bonding.
And the stakes here, I mean,
They're pretty alarming. This isn't some niche issue we're talking about. The traditional approach creates this huge, almost impossible barrier to entry for most people.
Look at the numbers, the hard data from the UK, where
A lot of this research comes from is just, it's staggering. The average national take-up of music at the GCSE level, that's basically the high school equivalent qualification.
Okay, buddy.
It hovers around 8 to 9%.
Okay, 8%. So you're saying more than 90% of kids have opted out of formal music education by the time they're 16.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If any other core subject, English, math, science, had an opt-in rate that low, we would call it a catastrophic systemic failure.
There would be a national
It's a
panic.
complete panic. But for music, it was sort of accepted as reality, the cost of maintaining rigor. But the implication is so clear. The system is failing over 90% of the students who might otherwise be really motivated to engage with music.
So you have this massive institutional conflict. The system demands a straight, orderly line.
Hierarchy, notation, discipline.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, the kid who is actually motivated, the one drawn to that cool guitar riff or that complex drum beat, finds success and enjoyment.
Enjoyment and what looks like chaos in autonomy and just listening.
And this is exactly where the cognitive conflict was born, because for decades, educators have had this really intuitive, really appealing framework to explain all the benefits of music, and that was Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences.
The famous MI theory, I remember this from school. It's everywhere in education, right?
Yeah.
The idea that we have like 8 or 9 different kinds of smarts.
Exactly. And specifically, the idea of musical intelligence, a natural sensitivity to pitch, rhythm, timbre, and a gift for composing and performing.
It just felt so right, didn't it? It gave legitimacy to the idea that you could be music smart, even if you struggled with, traditional algebra or writing essays.
It provided a beautiful philosophical foundation.
And honestly, the initial influence of MI theory was overwhelmingly positive for education. It opened the door for us to recognize that there's more to intelligence than an IQ score.
And we have tons of rigorous research showing the massive developmental, emotional, and academic benefits of being actively engaged with music, right?
Oh, indisputable. Let's get into those benefits because they're genuinely transformative. We're talking about music directly engaging some of the deepest structures in the brain.
Okay, so what's it doing?
Well, for starters, we know music stimulates the cingulate cortex and the limbic cortex. These are the regions that are critically involved in emotional processing, in self-awareness, in regulation.
So music doesn't just make you feel things.
No, it actually helps you process those feelings and regulate your emotional state. It's a tool.
So if you listen to a really fast, complicated beat, it can actually amp you up, increase your heart rate and alertness.
It can. It can entrain your brain waves and heart rate. And the reverse is also true.
Slower, quieter music can dramatically increase your ability to concentrate and relax. It's a direct physiological effect.
And the benefits go way beyond just emotion.
They stack up like crazy. Active musical engagement enhances verbal creativity. It significantly improves reading skills, especially with decoding and phonological awareness.
So like sounding out words.
Exactly. It boosts spoken language acquisition and it leads to demonstrable increases in overall academic performance. And yes, standardized test scores is a cognitive Swiss Army knife.
Okay, so we have this incredible success story. Music is amazing for your brain, and for a long time, MI theory seemed to explain it perfectly. It was like, see, music taps into this specific, identifiable brain module.
It was the perfect explanation.
But now, you're about to hit us with a pivot. This widely celebrated theory, which something like 94% of teachers reportedly use and love, is now considered a myth.
The scientific consensus has shifted dramatically, despite all those massive
Positive outcomes we just listed. The core idea of multiple intelligences theory is now largely categorized by academic neuroscience as a neuromyth.
Whoa, hang on.
A neuromyth, that sounds like a betrayal. How can something so popular, something that feels so right, be scientifically untrue?
educational practice, but it just lacks empirical support. The science isn't there.
So what's the core problem with the theory?
The core problem is the assertion that we have independent brain-based intelligences that all function in isolation from each other. Modern neuroscience, using decades of advanced brain imaging like fMRI, simply does not support that modular view of the brain.
Okay, I need the EL by 7 on this. Explain it like I'm 7. Why is the idea of separate hardwired boxes for music smarts and math smarts now considered fiction? If the brain isn't organized in neat little divisions, how is it organized?
Okay, great question.
Think of the old theory like a desktop computer from the 1990s.
Okay, I can picture the big beige tower.
Right, and inside that tower you had a dedicated sound card for audio, a dedicated
Graphics card for video, a dedicated CPU for processing, separate chips for separate jobs. That's the modular view.
Makes sense.
The new view, the one supported by all the modern brain imaging, is more like a highly complex, interconnected cloud network.
A cloud network where everything is shared.
Precisely. When you process language or listen to music or solve a complex math problem, the brain doesn't just activate a single dedicated module. It uses these huge, multifunctional networks. The same neural resources get shared across completely different domains.
Give me an example.
Okay. The networks in your brain that are responsible for understanding the sequence and structure of language, grammar and syntax, are also heavily involved in processing the sequence and structure of
harmony and rhythm in music. There is no isolated music box.
So instead of the brain building a brand new neural circuit for every single new skill we learn, it's just being
incredibly efficient. It's taking an old circuit and patching new functionality onto it.
That is the core idea. Neuroscientists have a term for it: exaptation.
Exaptation.
The evolutionary reuse of existing neural networks to support new additional processing demands. Think of it like a software patch for the brain.
Okay, give me another example of exaptation. Something that has nothing to do with music, just to nail this down.
Let's take motor control. We evolved these incredibly sophisticated neural networks for grasping objects, reaching out, controlling our force, feeling texture.
Right, basic survival stuff.
Exactly. But the exact same neural networks are exapted, they're reused to help us understand abstract, non-physical concepts that involve action, like verbs.
Wait, what?
When you hear the word kick or throw or grasp, the motor areas of your brain associated with those physical actions show a little burst of activation.
The brain didn't build a new verb understanding network. It just reused the physical action network it already had.
That is fascinating. The brain is the ultimate recycler. Okay, so the key takeaway here is huge.
The amazing results we see from music education are real, but they are not, because we're tapping into some isolated musical intelligence.
Exactly. They are driven by music's unique ability to activate and integrate multiple shared neural networks all at the same time.
Motor, language, emotional, auditory.
All of them working together. So we have to anchor the success of this new pedagogy not in an outdated feel-good theory, but in the rigorous modern understanding of how action, perception, and emotion are all fused together in the brain.
Okay, so with the old system failing 90% of students, and the theory everyone was using to justify music education turning out to be a neuromyth,
Right.
researchers at UCL, led by a woman named Lucy Green, saw a massive opportunity. They basically said, look, the students are already telling us
How they want to learn. Let's stop fighting the way popular musicians do it and start adapting it for the classroom.
It was an incredibly brave move. I mean, it meant taking a sledgehammer to decades of
Established teaching practice.
So the quest began. How did they start?
They started by first identifying the DNA of informal learning. They asked a simple question: what do popular musicians, the guitarists, the singers, the drummers, what do they actually do when they learn?
Let's lift that DNA, because it's basically the exact opposite of the classical structure we talked about.
It is. So first, and maybe most importantly, informal learners work on music they know and like. Choice is everything.
There's no forced curriculum of songs you hate.
None. Second, their version of sheet music is the sound itself. They learn by ear. They are constantly copying and embellishing what they hear on high-quality recordings. It's 100% oral skill, not sight reading.
And third, they're in charge. They direct their own learning, they work alone or in friendship groups, and they do it largely
Without a teacher hovering over them.
They are their own experts, their own guides. And fourth, they dive straight into the deep end. There are no simplified twinkle, twinkle, little star exercises.
no kiddie pool.
No, they tackle whole real-world songs, the stuff that's currently on the charts, the classics they admire, right from day one.
And finally, they don't separate the skills, right? It's all mixed together.
All mixed up, playing, The UCL project realized these weren't just fun activities, they were actual pathways to advanced musicianship.
So the quest became, how do we take this messy, chaotic, beautiful garage band method and somehow institutionalize it within the rigid walls of a high school classroom?
That was the million-dollar question. They knew they couldn't just fire the teacher, but they had to fundamentally redefine what the teacher's role was.
So how did they kick off the experiment? What did day one look like for these students?
It was rolled out in phases, and phase one was all about total student autonomy.
Okay.
The students walked into the
Classroom, and the teachers basically just handed them the keys to the car. They were told to bring in their own music, their choice, their genre. They had to organize themselves into friendship groups, pick from the available instruments.
And the instructions were what?
Simple. Teach yourselves this music purely by ear. You're in charge.
Okay, so what was the teacher doing during this? Because I'm imagining a traditional music teacher's every instinct is screaming, intervene, correct their posture, tell them that's the wrong chord.
And that was the genius of the method. For the first 2 or 3 lessons, the teacher's role was deliberately and explicitly passive. They had to become a ghost in the room.
Wow.
They were instructed to allow the students to make all the decisions, the music, the instruments, who plays what, how they figure it out, everything.
That must have been terrifying for the teachers. I mean, if an administrator walks by that classroom, what do they see? It probably looks like absolute chaos.
It did look like chaos. Kids talking, instruments making terrible noises, maybe some groups just sitting there listening to a track on repeat for 20 minutes. To an outsider, it looks like wasted time.
Total chaos.
And that fear, the fear of misbehavior, of wasted time, of no measurable progress, that was the #1 concern the teachers had. But that passive role was absolutely essential. It was the only way to genuinely build that crucial sense of ownership and autonomy.
So the students have to build their own car first,
Yep.
even if it's rickety and the wheels are square. And then the teacher, in phase 2, comes in as the expert mechanic who just offers a few subtle repairs.
That is a perfect analogy. After those first few lessons of complete autonomy, the teacher phased in. They re-entered the process, but not as a director shouting orders. They came back as a resource, a guide.
And the guidance was what? Subtle.
Very subtle. They might model a better way to hold a guitar pick if a student asked. They might help a group find a specific bass note they were struggling to hear. Or they'd offer general advice, but only when the group was genuinely stuck and actually requested help.
Okay, let me try a different analogy, a video game analogy.
I like it.
Traditional teaching is like the game gives you a GPS, a big glowing arrow that says, go here, turn left, press A. It's step-by-step instructions.
Yeah.
CGMF.
A rigid, linear path.
Yes, this new role, the facilitator, is more like being the dungeon master. The players, the students, they choose the quest, they pick their equipment, they film their own party. The dungeon master only drops in hints or models a skill when the team gets truly stuck on a puzzle, not when they're just experimenting and messing around.
That nailed it. The process looks messy and non-linear, like an improvised cooking session where you're just throwing stuff in a pan. But the final dish is more authentic and personal because the students made all the creative choices.
And this gets to what you call the institutionalization paradox, right?
Yes. The teachers are still incredibly effective, maybe even more effective than before, but their visible activity, their doing stuff, decreases dramatically. To an outsider, it looks like they're doing
Very little.
Which would make any school administrator very nervous.
Very anxious. Because external assessment, report cards and standardized tests, they demand linear
progress, and in this model, student skills often appear to get worse before they see this huge long-term improvement.
How does that happen? How do they get worse?
Well, a student might try to play a really complicated chord, and they'll fail spectacularly. It'll sound awful. Then they'll try a different one, and they might scrap the whole song and start over with a new one.
And in a traditional curriculum, that's 3 failures in a row. It looks like regression.
It looks like you're going backwards. But in the informal learning model, that is the process. That's how you build deep contextual knowledge. The students are mastering failure and learning how to be resourceful, but their progress graph, the thing the administrator wants to see, is not a straight line up. It's a zigzag with a bunch of momentary dips.
Okay, so that's the core conflict. But before we get to fixing the system, let's talk about phase 3. How did they prove this wasn't just a fun way to learn pop songs? How did they expand the repertoire?
Phase 3 was about expanding the tools and the musical horizons. First, they introduced specially prepared recordings. Sometimes they'd separate out the bass line or the drums or the melody
To help the students hear the layers more easily.
A little scaffolding for the ear.
Exactly. And second, and this is critical, they use this exact same informal method to tackle music way beyond contemporary pop.
Did they jump straight to, like, classical music? How on earth do you learn a Bach fugue by ear in a garage band setting?
They absolutely did. They expanded the repertoire to include Western classical music, jazz, various world music genres. The method stayed the same. The students would approach a super complicated, multi-layered classical piece, not by looking at the score, but by listening to the recording.
No way.
Yes, they'd choose parts, assign roles to their instruments, and figure out the harmonies and the counterpoint by ear together. They turned complex classical composition into a collaborative ensemble activity.
The content changed, but the informal process, the autonomy, the collaboration, the oral learning, that was still the engine, and it worked.
That's incredible. So let's get to the discovery. After these students
Spent all this time as the dungeon masters of their own musical quests. What did the data actually show? Did it work?
The results were honestly spectacular. All those initial teacher fears about chaos and wasted time, they vanished. Teachers reported that students were intensely motivated, they were exceptionally well in task, and their focus was coming from inside, from their own interests, not from a teacher telling them what to do.
So engagement was through the roof. But what about actual skills? Did they get better at music?
Yes. Their musical skills developed really well, particularly their listening, their playing, their singing, and maybe most importantly, their ensemble skills. Their really vital ability to play together, to harmonize, to dynamically adjust to what everyone else is doing in real time.
But you said the most revealing discovery was about how they understood music, the structure.
That was the big one. The qualitative data
Showed this massive improvement in their understanding of musical structure.
the layers. Tell me about this breakthrough moment.
Many students, especially the ones who had really struggled with formal music theory before,
they reported having this aha moment. They said they realized often for the very first time that music was made of layers, or that it had underneath bits.
Underneath bits. I love it.
That's a great description, isn't it? They were talking about the bass line, the rhythm track, the secondary harmony, the counter melody, things that were just a wall of sound to them before now had distinct parts.
Okay, but why did the informal method unlock that understanding when the formal theory-based method didn't?
Because the formal method so often isolates the melody. It gives you one line of notes to read and play to make it easier. The informal method forces you to start with the complete, messy, real-world recording, and to successfully copy that recording with your friends, you have to actively listen to the whole vertical stack of sound.
You can't ignore the underneath bits.
You have to analyze them. It fundamentally shifts you from being a passive consumer of a melody to being an active analyst of a whole composition.
And this wasn't just, kids saying they felt like they understood music better. You mentioned there was hard data to prove the method was superior.
Absolutely. This is the crucial part. In case control research, the students in the experimental group, the informal learners, scored demonstrably higher than the control group of traditional learners on a formal oral playing back task.
Get out of here.
It's the quantifiable proof. Learning by ear, collaboratively, using music you love is actually a superior way to develop core oral skills than the traditional method they're testing against.
And what about the social dimension? The inclusion triumph. That feels like maybe the most important finding of all.
It's vital. Students who had been labeled by the traditional system as, disaffected or disruptive or just lacking musical ability, they completely overturned those judgments.
You have an example of that.
There's one report that details a student who was often silent and marginalized in his formal lessons. But in his informal garage group, he became the confident lead arranger,
easily teaching complex rhythms to his peers. The method unlocked musical potential in students that the old hierarchical system had written off as failures.
That's powerful. It proves the method was the roadblock, not the student's own capacity. Okay, let's pivot back to the neuroscience, the neuromotor engine. We know this works in the classroom, but why does it work so well in the brain?
The mechanism is really rooted in the brain's action systems, specifically the Mirror Neuron System, or MNS.
Okay, refresh my memory. The MNS is that incredible system that fires both when you do something like pick up a cup and when you just watch someone else pick up a cup.
Exactly. It's how we simulate, understand, and predict other people's intentions. And the key here is that music is not just processed as auditory information. Your brain perceives it as embodied action.
So when I listen to a great guitar solo, my brain is simulating the physical movements the guitarist had to make to create those sounds.
Your MNS is firing, relying on
often a simulation of the performer's intentional gestures. Learning by ear forces this incredibly intimate connection between perception and production. You aren't just hearing a note,
You are internally simulating the muscular movement required to make that note.
So my motor cortex is sort of subtly, maybe unconsciously, moving along with the music, rehearsing the actions needed to produce those sounds, even if I'm sitting on the couch listening.
That's the key to why the informal model is so successful. It maximizes that action perception loop, and we can actually see the connection in the brain's anatomy. The neural resources are shared, especially with language.
Right, you mentioned that before.
We find that Broca's area, which is famous for its role in language grammar and syntax, and its counterpart in the right hemisphere, are heavily involved in processing musical structure, harmonic sequences, melodic hierarchy, complex rhythm.
So when a student in that garage band finally figures out a complicated harmonic shift in a pop song, they're literally using the same structural analysis tools a linguist would use to figure out a difficult sentence.
Precisely. The brain is using its fundamental sequencing and structure-building software for both. But the big question is, how does this physical simulation create the deep emotional experience of music?
The chills on your arm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where the M&S connects to the brain's affective or emotional systems.
Okay, the emotional mechanism.
Yes. The emotional power of music comes from the listener simulating the performer's motion. And this simulation connects the mirror neuron system to two really critical regions, the insula and the limbic system.
The insula. That's the part of the brain that processes our internal bodily states, right? It tells us if we're feeling hungry or excited or in pain.
Correct. The insula acts as the neural bridge. The M&S feeds the simulated physical action, the motion of the music, and the insula processes that physical data in relation to your own current internal bodily and emotional state.
So that's how a song can give me chills.
Yeah.
Or make me feel instantly connected to a total stranger at a concert.
Yes.
You're not just hearing the sound, your nervous system is literally feeling the physical and emotional intention behind the creation of that sound. It's linking your brain to the performer's brain and to everyone else in the room who is also
Listening and simulating.
It's a deep embodied active communication.
It is, and this constant active engagement, which is the heart of the informal learning model, creates profound and lasting structural changes in the brain, what we call neuroplasticity.
Let's get into the hard data on that. What does active musical training actually do to the physical architecture of the brain?
Well, the most compelling finding is that musical training uniquely enhances what are called far transfer effects. These are benefits that extend way beyond the specific skill of just playing music. Neuroimaging shows that musicians have tangible structural adaptations. They have increased gray matter volume in areas like Broca's area, and significantly increased connectivity in the white matter tracts, especially the corpus callosum, which is the superhighway that connects the two hemispheres of the brain.
So
The brain is physically reshaping itself, literally building more infrastructure based on whether or not you practice the guitar. That's incredible.
And this physical remodeling is directly related to
How long and how intensely you practice, and it leads to specific cognitive gains.
what's the main mechanism behind those gains?
A major one is rhythmic entrainment. Musical training, especially the precision you need for complex rhythms, hones the brain's ability to process time precisely. It's called temporal processing.
It makes your internal clock better.
Much better. Your brain gets better at anticipating timing and structure. And this improved temporal processing dramatically enhances a bunch of non-musical cognitive skills.
So by getting good at keeping a beat, you're essentially training your brain to be better at anticipating events and managing time in general, which is a massive executive function skill.
It is, and this leads to specific measurable gains. Children with musical training show better verbal memory, they have greater accuracy when they're learning the pronunciation of a
second language, enhanced reading ability, and just stronger executive functions across the board, planning, focus, self-control.
Seriously. So you're telling me that learning an instrument in childhood?
Can actually predict academic success later in life?
The research shows a massive positive correlation. Longitudinal studies show that kids who actively learn an instrument may predict their academic performance and even their IQ scores in young adulthood.
What about other factors, like maybe kids from wealthier families are more likely to take music lessons and do better in school?
That's the critical point. These effects hold up even when researchers meticulously control for confounding factors like socioeconomic status and parental education. active engagement, the physical act of playing, seems to be the magic ingredient.
Okay, so this whole deep dive has really built two powerful, undeniable pillars for the future of education and, well, for life.
It has.
Pillar number one, the informal learning model, empirically proven, maximizes engagement,
Autonomy, collaboration, and actual skill acquisition.
Check.
And pillar number two, neuroscience confirms that this active, embodied engagement fundamentally rewires
the brain for massive cognitive benefits across your entire lifespan, whether you can read music or not.
The synthesis is crystal clear. Music is a fundamental necessity for brain development, and these informal methods are the most effective way to get students to actually engage with it.
But the roadblock is still there, isn't it? It's the traditional institutional structure that demands that straight, easy-to-measure linear progress.
That's where policy reform becomes absolutely imperative. We have to address the anxiety of the teacher, the one who's facing that institutionalization paradox we talked about.
We have to make it safe for them to be the dungeon master.
Exactly. We need systemic policy changes that explicitly validate the facilitator role in teaching. Teachers have to be given the freedom to embrace methods where progress looks messy, where skills might temporarily dip during experimentation without them fearing they'll fail their performance metrics.
So we have to change how we assess students.
The focus has to shift away from, can you read this piece of paper correctly?
And shift towards assessing the things that are intrinsic to the informal approach. Creativity, collaborative skill,
self-efficacy, or complexity.
Okay, so that's the policy solution for education. But you said the implications of this go way beyond the classroom.
Yes.
Into healthcare and therapy.
Yes, let's zoom out, because if we know music is embodied action, this feeling to motion loop, we have to leverage that in therapeutic interventions.
So if music relies on that MNS Insula-Limbic circuit, how does knowing that help us optimize music therapy for something like stroke rehabilitation or PTSD?
It gives us a biological reason to focus our interventions specifically on rhythmic entrainment and movement.
Okay, what would that look like?
For example, with stroke patients who have impaired motor or speech circuits, interventions that use synchronized rhythmic activities like drumming or clapping or marching to a beat can help retrain those damaged
circuits by hijacking that MNS connection.
The brain is simulating the action, and that MNS insula loop can help enhance recovery and also help regulate their emotional state,
which is often a huge challenge after a stroke.
You're using active, synchronized movement tied to rhythm as a deliberate tool to physically rebuild neurological pathways. It's a direct line from a GarageBand pedagogy to neurological rehabilitation.
Wow. Okay, let's wrap this up with the biggest takeaway of all, the final mic drop. You teased us earlier about the protective powers of music for older adults.
This is one of the most surprising and exciting findings. Active musical participation physically changes the brain's architecture, and this provides an incredible shield against age-related cognitive decline.
What's the evidence for that?
Studies show that for older adults, regular engagement with a musical instrument, and again, that's playing, not just listening, is correlated with greater gray matter volume in their frontal regions and less age-related decline in overall brain volume.
And you said this was actually better than doing something like a crossword puzzle. Why?
Why is playing music a better weapon against dementia than the cognitive tasks we always hear about?
The key is integration. A crossword or Sudoku primarily
engages your language and logic networks. They're powerful, but they are domain-specific.
Right.
Playing an instrument forces the brain to simultaneously execute and integrate multiple complex functions all at once. You have motor control in your fingers or breath, you have auditory processing, you have visual processing or memory, sequencing, and emotional regulation.
It's a full brain workout. A crossword is like just doing bicep curls. Playing music is like doing a complex, full-body Olympic lift.
That is the perfect analogy. And the evidence is stunning. For participants over the age of 75, those who regularly played an instrument were less likely to be diagnosed with dementia over a 5-year period. The protective impact was significantly larger than for other activities often recommended for mental agility.
That is the ultimate practical takeaway for everyone listening, but let's not forget the social component. That ties right back to the success of the UCL model.
The social and evolutionary element is crucial. Music is a fundamental human trait for communication and social bonding. When people sing or play or dance together, even informally in that garage band setting, that social synchrony triggers the release of oxytocin,
The bonding hormone.
The success of the informal learning model is partly because it runs on peer collaboration and social synchronization, which chemically and neurologically reinforces the learning and the emotional connection.
So when those students are huddled together, teaching each other a baseline, they aren't just learning a chord. They are chemically bonding and experiencing profound, social affective regulation.
It's the full package. The next time you listen to music, just remember you are not just hearing sound waves, you are engaging in a fundamental, embodied, neurophysical act of communication. You are neurologically simulating the emotional and physical intentions of the person who created it, and you are simultaneously strengthening the architecture of your own brain.
That is a phenomenal thought to end on. So since active musical training, even the informal kind, predicts better academic performance, better executive function, and seems to be the ultimate shield against cognitive decline. What music choice will you make today that sets your future self up for success? Maybe it's finally time to pick up that instrument, find some friends, and just skip the sheet music entirely.
The power truly is in the doing.
That's it for this deep dive into the secret language of music. Thank you for joining us.
We look forward to diving deep with you again soon.